The year is 1990. High above the azure curvature of our world, a lonely sentinel of glass and polished aluminum drifts through the velvet blackness of the low Earth orbit. It is the Hubble Space Telescope, a masterpiece of human ingenuity designed to pierce the veil of the primordial dark and witness the first light of creation. It moves with a silent mechanical grace, completing a revolution every 96 minutes, a tiny spark of consciousness suspended against the backdrop of the eternal abyss. But as it passes over the coast of South America, moving toward the vast expanse of the South Atlantic, the Sentinel enters a region of invisible peril. Here, the protective embrace of our planet is not as robust as it seems. The magnetic shield that guards us from the fury of the sun is thin and frayed, dipping low toward the ocean waves. In this silent hollow, the radiation of the cosmos pours through like a leak in a dying ship. Inside the delicate circuitry of the telescope, a catastrophe begins. A single, high-energy particle, forged in the heart of a distant supernova eons ago, streaks through the vacuum. It does not care for the mission of man or the thirst for knowledge. It is a mindless bullet, a remnant of a violent epoch governed only by the cold laws of physics. It strikes a silicon wafer deep within the telescope's command computer. In an instant, a single bit of data is flipped. A 1 becomes a 0 becomes a 1. The result is a sudden electronic seizure. The mechanical heart of the telescope stutters. Data streams that should have carried the secrets of the cosmos are suddenly corrupted into a chaotic static. To the engineers on the ground, thousands of miles below, the signal is a scream in the dark. The eye that was meant to see across the vastness of time has been blinded by the very environment it was sent to explore. This event is not a tragedy in the eyes of the cosmos. It is merely the operation of the mechanism. We often imagine the universe as a grand stage set for our arrival, a tapestry woven with purpose and meaning. But the reality is far more chilling. The universe is not a home, it is a ruthless machine of unimaginable scale, governed by inexorable forces that do not recognize the flicker of biological life. It is a vast clockwork engine of entropy and decay, where every sun is a furnace slowly running out of fuel, and every galaxy is a collection of dust spiraling toward an inevitable oblivion. From this high vantage point, the Earth below does not look like a vibrant cradle of life. Instead, it resembles a failing generator. It is a small, fragile dynamo spinning in the void, its output dropping with every passing century. The magnetic field that protects us is not a divine shield, but a byproduct of a churning liquid core that is slowly cooling, destined to one day turn solid and leave the world exposed to the stripping winds of the solar void. We live in the brief, flickering light of a candle that is already guttering in the draft. This glitch in the South Atlantic is a reminder of our true standing in the cosmos. We are intruders in a realm of high energy radiation and freezing vacuum. The machines we build to explore this abyss are fragile things, prone to short circuits and structural failure. They are extensions of our own frailty, cast out into a system that is indifferent to their survival. When the radiation strikes the circuitry, it is not an act of malice. It is simply the machine of the universe continuing its work, unravelling the order we try so desperately to impose upon it. The Hubble stutters and resets, its internal logic struggling to comprehend the intrusion of the void. In this moment, the vast distance between human ambition and the reality of the cosmos is laid bare. We seek the symphony of the spheres, the harmonious laws that govern the stars, but we find only the grinding of gears. We find a mechanism so vast that its scale paradoxically renders us invisible. To the universe, the launch of a telescope is no more significant than the collision of two atoms in a distant nebula. Both are subject to the same laws of motion, the same inevitable decay. We are witnesses to a process that began 13,800,000,000 years ago, a process that does not require our observation to continue. The stars will ignite and they will die. The Hogen will devour entire solar systems. The very fabric of space will continue its inexorable expansion until every light is extinguished. This is the nature of the ruthless machine. It is a system of absolute efficiency and zero empathy. Yet, there is a melancholic beauty in this realization. In the face of such a cold and mechanical reality, the fact that we have dared to look up is nothing short of a miracle. We have used the very laws of this machine to build eyes that can see across the abyss. We have calculated the movements of the planets and the behaviour of light, turning the gears of the cosmos to our own advantage, if only for a fleeting moment in the grand scale of time. As the telescope emerges from the shadow of the South Atlantic, its systems slowly begin to recover. The corrupted data is purged, and the electronic heart begins to beat with a steady, rhythmic pulse once more. It turns its gaze away from the Earth and back toward the deep field, searching for the remnants of the first stars. It continues its mission, a small, defiant piece of hardware operating in an environment that seeks to dismantle it at every turn. But the glitch remains as a ghost in the system, a reminder that the void is always watching, always waiting. The universe is not waiting for us to discover its secrets. It is simply continuing its work of cooling and expanding, moving toward a final state of silent equilibrium. Our presence here is a brief anomaly, a flicker of light in a dark room that will eventually be reclaimed by the night. We are the product of the machine, yet we are the only ones who can hear its hum. We are the consciousness of the cosmos, a way for the universe to look back at itself and wonder. But as we peer into the abyss, we must remember that the abyss is not looking back with love or with hatred. It is not looking back at all. It is simply there, vast and eternal, operating with a precision that is as beautiful as it is terrifying. The engine of the stars does not pause for our prayers, and the laws of physics do not bend for our dreams. We are passengers on a failing generator, drifting through an unforgiving sea of stars, trying to make sense of the mechanism before the light finally fails. To understand the precarious nature of our existence, we must turn our gaze away from the silent stars and descend. We must pierce the thin, fragile crust of the world, leaving behind the air, the light, and the very memory of the sun. We travel through thousands of miles of solid rock, a crushing weight that would flatten any human ambition into a single layer of atoms. Here, the temperature climbs with a ruthless rhythm, fueled by the decay of radioactive isotopes and the lingering primordial heat left over from the very birth of the world. This is the heat of the collision, the kinetic energy of 1 billion falling stones trapped and buried beneath the mantle. As we reach a depth of nearly 3,000 kilometers, the solid world gives way to a subterranean ocean of fire. This is the liquid outer core, a vast swirling abyss of molten iron and nickel that spans a distance greater than the moon. It is here that we find the true engine of our survival, though it possesses no concern for the life it sustains. It is a massive planetary turbine, a self-exciting dynamo that operates with the cold, unyielding logic of a machine. This is not a heart that beats with purpose. It is a mechanism of fluid dynamics and electromagnetic induction, churning in the eternal dark. In the 1940s, a physicist named Walter Elsasser peered into this abyss with the eyes of mathematics. He began to strip away the myths of a solid, unchanging Earth and revealed instead a world of terrifying motion. He realized that this molten sea was not merely sitting in the dark, but was a conductor in a state of constant, violent upheaval. To understand this machine, we must employ the ladder of abstraction. Imagine a simple copper wire, coiled and spinning rapidly around a magnet. As the wire cuts through the invisible lines of magnetic force, it generates a flow of electrons. This is the fundamental principle of the generator that powers our cities, but on a scale that defies the human imagination. The Earth itself is both the wire and the magnet. The molten iron rises from the deeper, solid inner core driven by the intense heat that seeks to escape toward the surface. This is convection, the same process that causes water to dance in a boiling pot. But as this liquid iron ascends, it is seized by the inexorable rotation of the planet. This is the Coriolis effect, a law of motion that cares nothing for the complexity of the organisms living on the surface. It twists the rising plumes of metal into tight helical spirals, forcing the liquid into a series of massive vertical columns. These columns of spiraling iron are the wires of the planetary generator. As they move through an existing, perhaps even accidental magnetic field, they generate an electrical current. This current, in turn, strengthens the magnetic field, which then facilitates more current. It is a feedback loop of absolute efficiency, a self-sustaining cycle that has operated for billions of years. We call it the geodynamo, but it is better understood as a ruthless machine, a tireless engine that converts the kinetic energy of the Earth's rotation and its primordial heat into a shield of invisible force. This magnetic shield, the magnetosphere, stretches far out into the void, a silent sentinel standing between us and the fury of the sun. Without this mechanism, the solar wind, a relentless stream of charged particles, would strip away our atmosphere, turning our blue sanctuary into a scorched and lifeless husk. We owe our every breath to the churning of this iron sea, yet the machine is indifferent to our gratitude. It operates according to the laws of entropy and the conservation of angular momentum. It is a system of gears and fluids, a clockwork of unimaginable scale that will continue its work until the heat of the core finally dissipates into the oblivion of space. In this realization, we find the scale paradox once more. Our entire history, every empire raised and every poem written is a byproduct of a subterranean turbine. We are the unintended passengers on a spinning magnet, protected by a shield generated by the violent movements of a liquid we can never touch. The abyss beneath our feet is as vast and as alien as the abyss above our heads. The iron core does not know we are here. It does not feel the weight of our cities or the history of our wars. It simply turns, driven by the cooling of the earth and the pull of the primordial. When Walter Elsasser formulated his theories in the 1940s, he was describing a world that was cooling, a machine that was slowly, inevitably running down. Every watt of energy generated by the geodynamo is a watt of heat lost to the surface, a tiny fraction of the Earth's internal fire radiating away into the cold of the universe. The machine is efficient, but it is not eternal. There will come an epoch many billions of years from now when the last of the primordial heat has been spent. The convection will slow, the spirals of liquid iron will begin to falter, and the dynamo will finally grind to a halt. When that silence falls, the magnetic shield will unravel. The solar wind will descend upon the atmosphere like a predator, tearing the molecules of oxygen and nitrogen away from the gravity of the Earth. The oceans will evaporate, and the surface will be reclaimed by the void. This is the destiny of all planetary machines. They are temporary anomalies in a universe that moves toward a state of maximum entropy. We are witnessing a symphony of decay, where the music is composed of the grinding of tectonic plates and the swirling of molten metal. Yet, as we contemplate this cold, mechanical reality, we cannot help but feel a sense of majestic awe. We have used the light of reason to illuminate the darkest corners of our world. We have mapped the currents of the Iron Sea and understood the invisible forces that govern our fate. The mechanism is ruthless, yes, but it is also sublime. It is a testament to the order that can emerge from chaos, a brief moment of structured complexity in a universe that is otherwise silent and cold. We are the ghosts in the machine, the consciousness that has emerged from the friction of these planetary gears, daring to ask why the engine turns at all. We are the witnesses to the geodynamo, the small, fragile beings who have learned to read the rhythm of the iron heart and find within its cold logic a reason to keep looking up into the abyss. But the rhythm of this iron heart is not a steady, unchanging pulse. It is a flickering lamp, a stuttering engine that occasionally chooses to reverse its very nature. To understand the instability of the machine, we must transport ourselves to the year 1906 to the rugged volcanic landscape of the Massif Central in France. Here, amidst the ancient soot-coloured peaks of the Auvergne, a physicist named Bernard Brunner walked among the remnants of a primordial fire. He was not looking at the stars, but at the basalt, the cooled, hardened blood of the earth that had once spilled from the depths in a molten torrent. Brunner was a man of precise measurements, a servant of the mechanism who sought to read the history written in stone. He focused his attention on a specific layer of clay and volcanic rock near the village of Pontfarin. As the lava had flowed over the earth eons ago, it had baked the underlying soil, creating a permanent record of the moment of contact. But as Brunhes began to analyse the magnetic orientation of these stones, he encountered a phenomenon that defied the logic of his era. The magnetic signature within the basalt was not aligned with the North Pole as we know it today. It was inverted. The stones were screaming a truth that the world was not yet ready to hear. The compass had once pointed south. The shock of this discovery cannot be overstated. For centuries, the magnetic north had been the one constant for every sailor, every explorer, and every mapmaker. It was the invisible thread that tethered humanity to the geography of the planet. Yet, here was evidence that the iron sea beneath our feet had once churned in a different direction. The machine had flipped its polarity. The north had become the south, and the south had become the north. Brunhes had stumbled upon a ghost in the basalt, a remnant of a world where the very foundation of navigation was reversed. Imagine the Earth as a massive planetary tape recorder. As the molten rock rises from the abyss and begins to cool, it reaches a critical threshold known as the Curie point. At this precise temperature, the magnetic minerals within the liquid stone, tiny grains of magnetite acting like microscopic compass needles, align themselves with the prevailing magnetic field of the planet. Once the rock solidifies, these needles are frozen in place, locked into the crystalline structure of the basalt forever. They become a high-fidelity recording of the Earth's magnetic state at that exact moment in time. When Brunhes played back this recording from the 1906 perspective, he found that the track was playing in reverse. The machine does not care for our sense of direction. It does not recognise the labels of north or south that we have etched into our maps. To the geodynamo, these are merely temporary states in a chaotic system of fluid dynamics. The Earth is not a static monument. It is a shifting magnetic field generated by the violent heat-driven convection of liquid iron. This process is governed by the inexorable laws of magnetohydrodynamics, a complex dance of electricity and motion that is prone to sudden dramatic shifts. The reversal that Brunhes discovered was not a catastrophe or a miracle. It was simply the mechanical output of a subterranean turbine that had reached a point of instability. This is the ruthlessness of the planetary mechanism. We imagine the magnetic field as a protective shield, a gift from the cosmos that allows life to flourish by warding off the lethal radiation of the sun. But the shield is not a conscious guardian. It is a byproduct of the friction and heat within the core, a stray energy field produced by the grinding of planetary gears. When the convection currents within the outer core become turbulent, the magnetic field weakens. It begins to fray at the edges, the lines of force tangling and dissolving into a mess of magnetic eddies. During these epochs of transition, the protective canopy of the magnetosphere begins to unravel, leaving the surface of the Earth exposed to the cold, ionizing breath of the void. The history of our world is a tapestry of these reversals. Over the last 20 million years, the poles have swapped places hundreds of times. There is no set schedule, no predictable rhythm to this celestial metronome. Sometimes the field remains stable for millions of years, at other times it flips twice within a single millennium. We are currently living in an unusually long period of stability, a brief lull in the storm that has lasted for 780,000 years. But the signals are there for those who know how to read the rhythm of the iron heart. The magnetic field has been weakening significantly over the last few centuries, a sign that the machine may be preparing for its next great inversion. To the ruthless machine, a polarity reversal is a mere adjustment of the gears. To the fragile life forms clinging to the surface, it is a journey into the unknown. As the field collapses towards zero, the aurora borealis would no longer be confined to the frozen wastes of the poles. These ghostly lights, the visual manifestation of the sun's fury colliding with our atmosphere, would dance over the equator. The heavens would ignite with a symphony of emerald and crimson as the solar wind pours through the gaps in our failing armour. Our electronic infrastructure, the delicate nervous system of our modern civilization, would be battered by a deluge of cosmic particles. Satellites would fail, power grids would surge, and the silent navigation systems of migratory birds and sea turtles would be thrown into a state of total confusion. Yet, even in this looming catastrophe, there is a sense of majestic indifference. The Earth has weathered thousands of these reversals. Life has endured the unravelling of the shield and the reconfiguration of the poles time and time again. The basalt of France remains as a silent sentinel, a witness to the fact that we are living on a world that is fundamentally unstable. We are passengers on a craft whose engine room is a swirling abyss of molten metal, a place where the laws of physics are written in fire and shadow. Brunius died long before his discovery was fully accepted by the scientific establishment. He was a lonely pioneer who glimpsed the true nature of the ruthless machine before the rest of humanity was ready to face the abyss. He understood that our reality is a thin veneer, a fragile layer of stability floating atop a sea of chaos. The magnetic field that guides our ships and protects our atmosphere is not an eternal gift, but a temporary phenomenon, a flickering light in the vast, dark tapestry of the cosmos. As we look at the compass today, we must realize that the needle points north not because it is the destiny of the world, but because the current cycle of the geodynamo permits it. We are witnessing a single frame in a cinematic epic of unimaginable scale. The iron core will continue to churn, the heat will continue to decay, and the poles will inevitably drift and dance until they once again find the path to inversion. The machine is indifferent to our maps, our borders, and our survival. It simply turns, driven by the cooling of the primordial fire and the inexorable march of entropy. In the silence of the basalt, we find the echo of a world that was once upside down, and the promise of a future where the abyss will once again reclaim the north. The focus of our story shifts now to the 1950s, a decade where humanity began to peer through the veil of the mundane and into the deep mechanical heart of the world. While the surface of the planet was preoccupied with the rebuilding of nations and the icy tension of a new global order, a silent revolution was unfolding in the laboratories of Cambridge. Here, a man named Keith Runcorn turned his gaze toward the stones beneath our feet, seeking a signal that had been whispered into the grain of the earth since the dawn of time. He was a practitioner of paleomagnetism, a discipline that treats the very crust of the earth as a recording medium, a frozen memory of the magnetic forces that have governed the globe for eons. In the 1950s, the prevailing wisdom was that the continents were fixed sentinels, rooted in their positions since the cooling of the primordial crust. But as Runcorn and his colleagues began to measure the magnetic orientation of ancient rocks from different eras, they encountered a terrifying anomaly. The iron minerals within these stones, which act as microscopic compass needles, did not point toward the north we recognize today. Instead, as they moved further back into the depths of geological time, the magnetic north seemed to migrate wildly across the surface of the globe. To the scientists of that era, it appeared as though the poles were wandering ghosts, drifting across the vast reaches of the Pacific Ocean and the frozen wastes of Siberia in a chaotic, unpredictable dance. These were the restless poles, phantoms of a world that refused to remain static. Runcorn mapped these paths, tracing the movement of the magnetic north across hundreds of millions of years. He found that the further back one travelled, the more the poles seemed to diverge from their current sanctuary. It was as if the Earth was a ship whose compass had been possessed by a madness born of the abyss. However, the ruthless machine of the universe rarely operates on the whims of ghosts. Runcorn eventually realised that the poles were not the ones wandering. The magnetic field, though flickering and prone to reversal, was tethered to the rotation of the planet itself. It was the land that was moving. The continents, once thought to be eternal and unmoving, were actually rafts of granite and basalt drifting atop a sea of molten shadow. The apparent movement of the poles was a grand illusion, a byproduct of the inexorable drift of the tectonic plates. The wandering ghosts were not in the sky, but in the ground beneath his feet. This realization turned the world into a vast tapestry, a woven history of movement and collision that had been recorded in the deep silence of the seafloor. As research vessels began to map the depths of the Atlantic, they discovered a series of magnetic stripes emanating from the mid-ocean ridges. These stripes were symmetrical, a perfect mirror image on either side of the volcanic rift. They were the rhythmic heartbeat of the geodynamo, a physical record of every time the poles had flipped, captured in the cooling lava as it surged up from the mantle. This seafloor tapestry revealed a planet in a state of constant, violent renewal, a mechanism that devours its own history even as it writes a new chapter in the language of basalt and brine. As Runcorn delved deeper into the data, the image of the magnetic field began to change. It was no longer the solid, eternal wall of protection that earlier generations had imagined. Instead, it was revealed to be a flickering, restless byproduct of the churning core. Deep within the abyss of the Earth, 3,000 kilometers beneath the crust, lies a realm of liquid iron and nickel. This is the engine room of the ruthless machine. Here, the heat left over from the formation of the planet, combined with the decay of radioactive isotopes, creates a convective storm of unimaginable scale. The liquid metal rises and falls in great spiraling plumes, driven by the rotation of the Earth. This movement generates the magnetic field through a process known as the geodynamo, but this process is far from stable. It is a turbulent, chaotic system, a symphony of fluid dynamics where the laws of physics operate with a cold and terrifying precision. The magnetic field we rely upon for navigation and protection is merely a shadow cast by this internal fire. It is a temporary arrangement of forces, a momentary alignment in a system that is fundamentally predisposed to chaos. The poles do not flip because of an external catastrophe. They flip because the machine in the core is restless. It is a byproduct of the inexorable cooling of the planet, a signal that the Earth is slowly but surely losing its primordial heat to the void of the cosmos. To look at the work of Keith Runcorn is to confront the fragility of our geological epoch. We exist in a brief window of stability, a lull in the churning of the metallic sea. The magnetic field is not a gift intended for our survival. It is the exhaust of a planetary engine that has been running for 4.5 billion years. It is a mechanism that cares nothing for the biological remnants that cling to the surface. When the heat eventually fails and the core solidifies into a silent tomb of iron, the magnetic field will vanish into oblivion. The tapestry of the seafloor will cease to be woven, and the wandering ghosts will finally find their rest. Until then, we are witnesses to a flickering reality. The 1950s marked the moment when we stopped seeing the Earth as a static stage and began to see it as a dynamic, ruthless machine. We learned that the very ground is in motion, and that the invisible shield above us is a transient phenomenon, a ghost generated by the friction of a world that is still cooling from its violent birth. The poles will continue their restless dance, and the geodynamo will continue its churning, until the last of the primordial fire is extinguished, and the Earth joins the cold silence of the eternal void. In the work of Runcorn, we find the melancholic truth of our existence. We are transient passengers on a world that is fundamentally unstable, guided by a compass that points toward a north that is constantly preparing to vanish. But the vanishing is not merely a future threat. It is a present reality manifest in a profound structural failure. As we map the invisible contours of our world, we find that the planetary armour is not a uniform shell of iron-clad certainty. It is a fraying tapestry, showing signs of deep and inexorable fatigue. Above the churning waters of the South Atlantic, stretching from the verdant coasts of South America to the southern reaches of Africa, a vast depression has formed in the magnetic shield. This is a geographic scar in the unseen world, a region where the strength of the field has withered to a mere fraction of its expected power. This is the South Atlantic Anomaly, the first major crack in the hull of the vessel we call home. To understand this catastrophe of scale, we must view the Earth as the ruthless machine it truly is. If the magnetic field is a roof designed to ward off the lethal weather of the cosmos, then this region is where the rafters have begun to rot and the ceiling has begun to sag. The Van Allen radiation belts, those two vast donuts of captured solar fire that usually hover thousands of kilometers above our heads, dip dangerously low in this corridor. They reach down toward the surface like the heavy, wet folds of a collapsing tent, bringing the primordial fury of the sun into a realm where it does not belong. In this abyss, the void of space reaches down to touch the thinning veil of our atmosphere, creating a pocket of radiation that is a lethal trap for anything that dares to pass through it. The machine does not repair itself. It simply operates until the friction of its own existence leads to decay. This dent is not a temporary glitch in the system, but a fundamental revelation of the limits of the planetary mechanism. Deep beneath this anomaly, the geodynamo is behaving erratically. A massive eddy, a whirlpool of liquid iron 3,000 kilometers below the crust, is spinning in a direction that opposes the primary field. It is a countercurrent in the metallic sea, a mechanical failure that is slowly devouring the protection we take for granted. This patch of reversed flux is growing, spreading like a contagion across the southern hemisphere, signalling that the engine room is in a state of chaotic transition. Our modern sentinels, the silver gods of silicon and copper that we have flung into the heavens, are the first to feel this mechanical unravelling. As a satellite orbits the Earth, moving from the safety of the northern skies into the shadow of the South Atlantic, it enters a zone of silent peril. Within this abyss, computer memories are erased by the invisible passage of a single, high-energy proton. High-voltage systems spark and fail as the radiation floods the delicate circuits. The hardware of the 21st century, from the sophisticated sensors of SpaceX rockets to the panoramic eyes of orbiting telescopes, finds itself suddenly blinded and broken. This is the bit flip, a momentary lapse in the logic of the machine, where a zero becomes a one and a mission worth billions of dollars vanishes into oblivion. Even the International Space Station, that fragile monument to human cooperation, must take precautions as it drifts through this sagging roof of radiation. The astronauts see flashes of light in their closed eyes, the cosmic rays physically striking their retinas as they pass through the anomaly. It is a reminder that we are biological remnants clinging to a world that is fundamentally hostile to our presence. We have built a civilization based on the assumption of a stable magnetic field, yet we are realizing that we exist within a window of structural decline. The technology we rely upon for global communication, navigation, and the very flow of information is the first victim of this mechanical decay. The machine is not failing because of a sentient choice. It is failing because it is a machine, and all machines eventually succumb to the inexorable march of entropy. This anomaly is a sentinel of the coming transition. It is the physical manifestation of the geodynamo's restlessness. As the magnetic field continues to weaken, the South Atlantic Anomaly expands, threatening to split the magnetic field into two distinct poles, or to leave the planet briefly naked to the solar wind. This is the ruthless nature of the cosmos. It does not provide us with a permanent sanctuary. It provides us with a temporary reprieve. The tapestry of our magnetosphere is being unravelled by the very forces that created it. The liquid fire of the core, which gave us a shield for eons, is now the source of our vulnerability. We look upon this dent in the sky with a sense of melancholic wonder. It is a reminder that the Earth is not a static stage but a dynamic, cooling engine that is slowly losing its grip on the forces that sustain us. The vast, silent void of the cosmos is always pressing in, waiting for a breach in the armour. Every time a satellite fails over the coast of Brazil, every time a communication link is severed by a burst of solar particles, we are witnessing the internal decay of the planetary mechanism. We are learning that our epoch of stability is a gift of chance, a lull in the churning of a metallic sea that cares nothing for the empires of man. The South Atlantic Anomaly is a glimpse into the future of a dying world. It is the shadow of a time when the magnetic field will no longer be a wall but a series of scattered weak remnants. In that distant epoch, the solar wind will devour the atmosphere, and the vibrant blue of our world will fade into the cold, red silence of a planetary tomb. But for now, the machine continues to turn. The liquid iron continues to spiral in the dark abyss, and the anomaly continues to grow, a testament to the fact that we live on a world that is constantly preparing for its next great transformation. We are the witnesses to this unravelling, the observers of a masterpiece that is being slowly erased by the hand of time. The tragedy of the machine is that it cannot feel the beauty of the symphony it creates, nor can it feel the catastrophe of its own breakdown. It merely exists, governed by the cold laws of fluid dynamics and thermodynamics. We, the biological sparks that have emerged in this brief moment of warmth, are the only ones who can see the majesty in the decay. We see the sagging roof not as a reason for despair, but as a reminder of the fragility and preciousness of our moment in the sun. The South Atlantic Anomaly is a warning, a sign that the eternal shield is a myth, and that we are passengers on a magnificent failing craft, drifting through an infinite and indifferent void. As the magnetic poles prepare to dance once more, we stand on the surface looking up at an invisible sky that is slowly losing its strength. acknowledging the truth that all things, from the smallest atom to the largest planet, are subject to the inexorable law of the end. As the shield thins and the South Atlantic Anomaly expands like a growing bruise upon the magnetosphere, the very orientation of our world begins to slide. Deep beneath the permafrost of the Canadian Arctic, the invisible ghost of the North is restless. The planetary mechanism, that colossal engine of liquid iron churning 3,000 kilometers beneath our feet, has entered a new and frantic phase of its inexorable cycle. This is the great migration of the magnetic north, a silent and invisible journey that reveals the cold indifference of the machine we inhabit. For centuries, the North Magnetic Pole was a slow wanderer, a sentinel that moved with the leisure of a glacier. When it was first located by explorers in the year 1831, it seemed almost stationary, a fixed point in the frozen wastes of northern Canada. For most of the 20th century, its pace was measured and predictable, a mere 15 kilometers per year. It was a subtle shift in the tapestry of the magnetic field, a rhythmic drift that allowed our maps and our minds to remain in a state of comfortable equilibrium. We lived under the illusion of a static world, a stage that would never shift beneath our feet. But the machine does not care for our illusions of stability. In the late 1990s, something within the abyss changed. The internal gears of the Earth seemed to slip, gaining a terrifying momentum that caught the scientific world off guard. The slow crawl of the pole suddenly ignited into a desperate sprint. By the dawn of the 21st century, the migration had accelerated to a staggering 55 kilometers per year. The pole abandoned its long-standing home in the Canadian Arctic and began a headlong plunge across the international dateline, racing toward the vast and desolate reaches of Siberia. This acceleration is the physical manifestation of a surge in the liquid fire of the outer core. Deep within the planet, a jet of molten iron, moving at speeds that defy our understanding of geological time, is pushing and pulling at the magnetic lines of force. It is as if the great geodynamo, the engine that generates our protective shield, has experienced a sudden increase in torque. The gears are slipping, the belts are fraying, and the momentum is carrying the pole across the roof of the world at a pace that is unprecedented in the era of human observation. The ruthless machine of the Earth operates on a scale of power that renders our civilization a mere footnote. This magnetic surge is entirely indifferent to the intricate systems of navigation we have constructed. The global positioning system, the satellites that circle the Earth like electronic sentinels, and the very foundations of modern aviation and maritime travel are all calibrated to a world that is supposedly stable. But the machine is shifting. Every few years, we are forced to rewrite the world magnetic model, a frantic attempt to update our digital maps before they become relics of a vanished era. The Earth does not adjust its behaviour to suit our technologies. We are the ones who must scramble to keep pace with its cold, mechanical whims. There is a profound melancholy in this migration. The North Magnetic Pole is the phantom heart of our planet's orientation, the invisible needle that has guided explorers and sailors through the dark for generations. To see it flee its ancestral home is to realise that the Earth is not a permanent sanctuary, but a dynamic and ageing vessel. We are passengers on a craft that is constantly redesigning itself, unravelling its old patterns to weave something new and unfamiliar. This silence of the Arctic wastes, where the pole once lingered for eons, is now a testament to the fact that nothing in the cosmos is truly fixed. As the pole races towards Siberia, it crosses an invisible threshold. We are witnessing the beginning of a potential catastrophe for our established order, though for the Earth, it is merely another tick of the geological clock. The surge in speed suggests that the magnetic field is in a state of high turbulence, a period of instability that may be the precursor to a complete reversal of the poles. The mechanism is resetting itself, and in that process, the protective veil that keeps the solar wind at bay may grow even thinner. We are entering an epoch of uncertainty, where the very compasses we rely on may one day point toward a void of confusion. The sheer scale of this movement is a reminder of our own insignificance. 55 kilometers per year may seem small on a human scale, but on a planetary scale, for a feature as massive as the magnetic pole, it is a violent leap. It is the sound of the world's internal clock accelerating, the gears spinning faster as the energy of the core seeks a new equilibrium. The vast, silent abyss of the interior is communicating with the surface in a language of shifting vectors and declining intensities. We are the witnesses to this silent revolution, the observers of a primordial force that is moving the goalposts of our reality. The magnetic north is now a wanderer of the deep ocean, crossing the top of the globe where the ice is thin and the stars are the only constant. It moves through the dark, through the eternal winter of the high latitudes, driven by the churning of iron thousands of miles below. There is no emotion in this movement, no malice, and no intent. It is simply the result of fluid dynamics and thermodynamics, the cold laws of physics manifesting as a planetary transformation. The Earth is a cooling engine, and as it cools, the flow of its lifeblood changes, dragging the magnetic field along with it into the unknown. We look toward the future with a sense of melancholic optimism, hoping that our technology can bridge the gap between our need for stability and the Earth's requirement for change. But the lesson of the surge is clear. We are not the masters of this world. We are guests in a house that is slowly being dismantled and rebuilt by a blind and tireless architect. The Great Migration of the North is a signal from the depths, a reminder that the epoch of the stable compass is ending. The void is calling, and the pole is answering, racing toward a new destination in a Siberian wilderness that cares nothing for the empires of man. The tapestry of the magnetosphere continues to unravel, and the gears of the ruthless machine continue to turn. We stand on the surface, looking at our screens and our compasses, realizing that the ground beneath us is part of a much larger and more indifferent symphony. The North Magnetic Pole's journey is a sentinel of the coming transition, a marker of the fact that we live in a universe defined by motion and decay. As the pole continues its sprint toward the horizon, we are left to contemplate the fragility of our position in the cosmos, acknowledging that the only constant in the entire history of the universe is the inexorable march of change. To understand the true magnitude of the danger represented by the current acceleration of the magnetic poles, we must cast our gaze backward through the deep time of the geological record, returning to a moment when the machine truly faltered. 41,000 years ago, the primordial engine of the Earth entered a period of catastrophic instability, known today as the Lachamp excursion. This was not a mere shift in position, but a systemic failure of the planet's primary defense mechanism. For a period of several centuries, the geodynamo within the liquid outer core slowed its churning, and the invisible shroud that protects the world from the wrath of the sun began to unravel. The magnetic field did not simply weaken, it plummeted to a mere 5% of its current strength. In the cold, calculating logic of the cosmos, the uptime of the biological experiment was interrupted by a scheduled maintenance of the planetary architecture, and the consequences for the life caught in the gears were total. During this epoch, the Earth was a world without a shield. The ruthless machine of the universe, unhindered by the magnetic barrier we take for granted, began to pour its raw energy directly into the atmosphere. This was an era of atmospheric collapse, where the influx of ultraviolet radiation and cosmic rays acted as a corrosive force against the very air. The ozone layer, that fragile chemical veil, was stripped away by the unrelenting bombardment of solar protons. Without the magnetic sentinel to deflect the solar wind, the sky itself became a source of terror. Scientists speculate that the heavens were no longer a serene blue, but were instead illuminated by haunting blood-red auroras that dance not just at the poles, but across the entire globe, reaching as far as the equator. To any conscious observer standing on the surface, the universe would have appeared to be closing in, the stars themselves seemingly intent on devouring the world below. This period of instability was not merely a curiosity of physics, it was a biological catastrophe that reshaped the destiny of our species. It is no coincidence that the Lachamp's event aligns with a final decline and eventual extinction of the Neanderthals. For hundreds of thousands of years, these robust relatives of humanity had endured the crushing weight of the ice ages, yet they could not survive the failure of the planetary machine. As the ultraviolet radiation reached lethal levels, the world became a gauntlet of survival. The large mammals of the Pleistocene, the great megafauna that had dominated the landscapes of Europe and Australia, began to vanish into the abyss of extinction. Their disappearance was the result of a chain reaction, a cascade of failures triggered by the weakening of the magnetic field. The plants withered under the intensified light, the climate shifted as the ionizing radiation seeded clouds and altered weather patterns, and the food chains that had sustained the giants of the Earth simply snapped. The universe does not provide a sanctuary for its inhabitants. It only provides temporary intervals of stability, brief windows of uptime for biological accidents to flourish. We are the products of an environment that has, for most of our history, been shielded by a fluke of fluid dynamics in the core. When that shield dropped 41,000 years ago, the true nature of the cosmos was revealed. It is a place of cold, unblinking light and high-energy particles that care nothing for the fragility of DNA or the aspirations of a species. The extinction of the Neanderthal serves as a grim reminder that we are tethered to a mechanism that we cannot control and that can, at any moment, reset itself. The La Chance event was a preview of the void, a moment when the tapestry of life was nearly unravelled by the very forces that created the stage for it. As we witness the current decline in our magnetic field and the frantic march of the North Pole toward the Siberian wastes, we must recognise the pattern of the ruthless machine. The geodynamo is not a sentient protector. It is a cooling engine of iron and nickel, subject to the inexorable laws of entropy and chaos. When it transitions between states, it does not account for the survival of the organisms on the surface. To the universe, an extinction event is merely a reorganisation of matter, a shift in the local entropy. The loss of the Neanderthals was not a tragedy in the cosmic sense. It was a data point, a minor correction in the long and indifferent history of the Earth. The sky turned into a furnace, the protection of the magnetosphere became a memory, and the ancestors of humanity were forced to hide in the deep shadows of caves to escape the burning eye of the sun. This ancient catastrophe highlights the scale paradox of our existence. We build our civilizations and dream our dreams on a thin crust of rock, oblivious to the fact that the entire structure is suspended over an abyss of molten metal and silent radiation. The failure of the magnetic field 41,000 years ago was a mechanical breakdown on a planetary scale. It was the sound of the gears grinding to a halt before they could restart in a new configuration. In that silence, the silence of the dying field, the world was laid bare to the primordial forces of the vacuum. The ultraviolet flux was a silent killer, an invisible fire that permeated the environment, causing mutations, destroying eyesight, and altering the very chemistry of the Earth's surface. It was a test of survival that many failed, leaving behind only fossilized remnants and stone tools as evidence of their struggle against the cosmic machine. We look back at the La Chance event not as a distant myth, but as a sober warning of what is possible. The current fluctuations in our magnetic field are the whispers of that same machine, the stirring of a giant that has slept for millennia but is now showing signs of waking. The decline of the field by nearly 10% since the 19th century is a signal that the stability we have enjoyed is a temporary gift, a brief respite in a much longer cycle of upheaval. The universe is a vast and indifferent symphony of energy, and we are but a few notes played during a moment of calm. If the field continues its decline, we may once again find ourselves standing under a sky of fire, watching the ozone layer unravel as the solar wind pours in to claim the atmosphere. The lesson of the 41,000-year-old catastrophe is one of melancholic realism. It teaches us that our presence here is conditional. We exist because the machine allows it, and we will continue to exist only as long as the engine in the core continues to spin in its current orientation. There is no divine mandate for our survival, no cosmic law that requires the Earth to remain a habitable oasis. There is only the inexorable movement of the iron, the relentless flow of heat, and the cold laws of physics that dictate the rise and fall of planetary shields. We are the witnesses to a process that transcends our understanding, the observers of a mechanism that operates on timescales so vast that our entire history is but a single tick of its clock. The La Chance event was a reminder that the void is always waiting, just beyond the reach of our invisible shield, ready to reclaim the world whenever the machine falters. To understand the true nature of a geomagnetic reversal is to witness the slow and agonizing breakdown of a planetary engine. We often imagine the magnetic field as a solid, immutable shield, a permanent fixture of our world like the mountains or the oceans. but in the cold light of cosmic time, it is revealed as a flickering candle, a temporary byproduct of a churning, violent mechanism deep within the abyss of the Earth. When this mechanism begins to fail, it does not do so with the grace of a setting sun. Instead, it behaves like an ancient, overworked engine that has finally reached the limits of its endurance. It begins to sputter and cough, its rhythmic pulse stuttering as the internal friction of the molten iron reaches a point of critical instability. This is the anatomy of the flip, a period of magnetic anarchy where the invisible geometry of our world begins to unravel. In a state of stability, the magnetic field is a grand, orderly tapestry of lines that emerge from the southern hemisphere and arch gracefully over the planet to reconnect at the north. This dipole structure is the foundation of our navigational certainty and our atmospheric protection. However, as the reversal commences, this elegant symmetry is lost. The engine of the core, that vast and indifferent assembly of liquid iron and heat, begins to lose its coherence. The primary north and south poles do not simply exchange places in a clean, synchronized movement. Rather, they begin to weaken and wander, losing their grip on the planet they have shielded for eons. The strength of the field collapses, and the energy that once maintained the dipole begins to fragment into a chaotic web of smaller, weaker magnetic signatures. Imagine a massive prehistoric machine, its gears worn thin by millions of years of inexorable motion. As it begins to fail, the steady hum of its operation is replaced by a dissonant grinding. The fluid dynamics of the outer core, driven by the intense heat of the primordial interior, become turbulent and unpredictable. In this state of mechanical distress, the magnetic field lines, once straight and purposeful, begin to tangle like a knotted rope. They twist and loop back on themselves, creating pockets of magnetic intensity in places where they have no right to exist. The single North Pole and single South Pole are replaced by a multitude of transient ghost poles that sprout across the globe. One might find a North Pole emerging from the heart of the Atlantic Ocean, while another flickers into existence over the Siberian tundra. These are the sparks of a dying engine, the erratic outputs of a system that can no longer maintain its primary function. This period of transition is a time of profound vulnerability. As the main field continues to unravel, the protective envelope that deflects the solar wind begins to fray at the edges. The magnetosphere, once a robust sentinel standing against the radiation of the void, shrinks toward the surface of the Earth. The sky, which we have always perceived as a peaceful blue expanse, becomes a theatre of invisible catastrophe. Without the firm guidance of the dipole, the charged particles of the sun are no longer funneled toward the uninhabited poles. Instead, they rain down across the entire planet, penetrating deep into the atmosphere. The aurora, usually a rare and beautiful spectre confined to the high latitudes, begins to haunt the equatorial heavens, a shimmering sign that the mechanical shield has been compromised. The engine does not die all at once. It gasps and recovers, only to fail again in a different configuration. This process can last for thousands of years, an epoch of uncertainty where the very orientation of life is thrown into disarray. For the creatures of the Earth that rely on the magnetic field for migration, this is a time of lethal confusion. The internal compasses of birds, sea turtles, and whales become useless, as the lines of force they follow turn into a labyrinth of dead ends and false directions. The mechanism of the planet has ceased to provide the steady rhythm required for their survival, leaving them to wander aimlessly into the jaws of extinction. It is a ruthless demonstration of the fact that the cosmos does not provide for the needs of the living. It merely operates according to the cold laws of thermodynamics. As the field strength drops to a mere 10% of its usual intensity, the atmosphere itself begins to feel the weight of the sun's fury. The ozone layer, our secondary shield against the ultraviolet fire of the star, is eroded by the influx of cosmic rays. The air we breathe becomes a chemical battleground, as the solar wind strips away the ions that maintain the balance of our world. This is not a sudden explosion, but a slow and steady decay, a gradual surrender to the vacuum that surrounds us. The Earth, in this state, is like a ship adrift in a storm with a failing motor, its lights flickering, its hulls creaking under the pressure of the abyss. We are the passengers on this vessel, oblivious to the fact that our safety is entirely dependent on the chaotic flow of molten metal 3,000 kilometers beneath our feet. Eventually, the engine will find its new rhythm. The chaotic, knotted rope of magnetic lines will begin to straighten, and the many wandering poles will merge once more into a single dominant dipole. But when the smoke clears and the mechanism restarts, the world will be upside down. What was once north will be south, and the compasses of the future will point toward a horizon that our ancestors would not recognize. The flip is complete. The engine has found a new orientation, a new way to spin, and the shield will once again grow strong and steady. But the transition, the centuries or millennia of breakdown, will have left its mark on the tapestry of life. This is the cycle of the ruthless machine we call Earth. It is a process that has occurred hundreds of times over the billions of years of its existence, and it will occur hundreds of times more. Each reversal is a reminder of our precarious position in the cosmos, a testament to the fact that our civilization is built upon a foundation that is fundamentally unstable. We live in the brief moments of mechanical efficiency, the quiet intervals between the sputtering and the coughing of the core. The unravelling of the magnetic field is not a tragedy to the universe. It is merely a change in the state of a planetary mechanism, a minor adjustment in the vast and silent symphony of energy that defines the void. We are the witnesses to this inexorable decay and rebirth, standing on a thin crust of reality while the great engine below grinds toward its next inevitable failure. In the silence of the magnetic transition, we are reminded that we do not own this world. We are merely allowed to exist within it for as long as the machine continues to turn. In the quiet laboratories of the mid-19th century, specifically in the year 1835, the invisible was first given a mathematical voice. Carl Friedrich Gauss, a man of precise calculation, began to map the silent currents that surround our world. He realized that the Earth was not merely a rock in the void, but a massive rotating generator. Yet, even in those first tentative measurements, a shadow was cast. Since the moment we began to watch, since the very hour we learned to measure the pulse of the planet, that pulse has been slowing. We have discovered that in the short interval of less than 2 centuries, the global magnetic field has withered by nearly 10%. To the fleeting lifespan of a human being, this may seem a negligible shift, a mere footnote in the annals of geophysics, but to the cosmos, and to the ruthless machine of the Earth itself, this is a catastrophic leak in the hull of our planetary vessel. We must view the Earth not as a nurturing mother, but as a complex and indifferent mechanism. At its centre, 3,000 kilometres beneath the soil of our cities, lies a vast ocean of liquid iron and nickel, churning at temperatures that rival the surface of the sun. This is the geodynamo, the internal combustion engine of our world. It is a battery that has been discharging for 4,500,000,000 years. The 10% decline we observe today is the visible evidence of the battery draining, a slow flickering of the lights before a temporary blackout. We are currently living through the transition phase of a massive planetary cycle, a process that operates on timescales so vast they render human history an insignificant blur. This decay is not an accident. It is a fundamental function of the machine. The flow of molten metal is losing its coherence, the organised symphony of the core is descending into a chaotic noise, and as a result, the shield that preserves us is beginning to fray at the edges. This unravelling is most evident in a region of the world known as the South Atlantic Anomaly. Here, off the coast of South America and stretching toward the tip of Africa, the magnetic shield has thinned to a dangerous degree. It is a dent in our armour, a hole in the umbrella through which the radiation of the abyss begins to leak. When our satellites pass through this zone, their electronic brains are assaulted by high-energy particles that should have been deflected by the magnetosphere. They experience glitches, memory failures, and the silent bite of cosmic rays. This is the reality of the modern decay. It is the first tangible sign that the invisible walls of our fortress are being breached. The machine is not failing by mistake, it is merely shifting gears, and in the gears of the Earth, human civilization is little more than a thin layer of dust. As the strength of the field continues its inexorable slide, the atmosphere becomes increasingly vulnerable to the relentless pressure of the solar wind. This stream of plasma, ejected from the heart of the sun, acts like a cosmic sandblaster. Without the magnetic sentinel to divert it, the solar wind would strip away our air and boil away our oceans, leaving the Earth a skeletal remnant like Mars. We are witnessing the beginning of a period of profound instability. The 10% loss is the first tremor of a coming earthquake in the fundamental physics of our environment. The poles are wandering with an increasing frantic speed, no longer anchored by the steady hand of a strong dipole. They are the needles of a compass spinning in the dark, searching for a direction that no longer exists in a coherent form. We often imagine that we are the masters of this world, that our digital networks and concrete towers represent a permanent dominion. But our entire technological tapestry is woven over a void. Our power grids, our global positioning systems, and the very internet that defines the modern epoch are all predicated on the assumption that the magnetic environment of the Earth will remain stable. The ruthless machine of the planetary core has no such obligation to us. If the field continues to decay at its current rate, we will find ourselves exposed to a celestial environment that is fundamentally hostile to the fragile electronics we depend upon. The radiation levels at the surface will rise, not to the point of immediate extinction, but enough to alter the very chemistry of our upper atmosphere, creating a new and unpredictable sky. This process is a reminder of the scale paradox that defines our existence. We measure our lives in decades, our civilizations in centuries, yet the Earth operates in eons. The current decline began long before the first steam engine was ignited, and it will likely continue long after the last of our monuments has crumbled into the dust of oblivion. We are caught in the transition, a brief and flickering moment between two stable states of the planetary mechanism. This is the reality of our era. It is not a time of stasis, but a time of quiet, unrelenting change. The Earth is shedding its old skin, and the magnetic field is the first layer to go. The decay of the magnetic field is a testament to the fact that the universe is a place of entropy and inevitable breakdown. Nothing is forever. Even the great engine that has protected life for billions of years must eventually sputter and stall. This 10% drop is the sound of the clock winding down, a mechanical groan from the deep interior of the world. It is an invitation to look beyond our immediate concerns and contemplate the vast and silent cycles of the cosmos. We are the witnesses to a planetary event that has occurred hundreds of times before we existed, and will occur hundreds of times after we are gone. In this state of modern decay, there is a certain melancholic majesty. We realise that we are passengers on a magnificent failing machine, hurtling through the vacuum of space while the walls of our cabin begin to thin. The Earth does not care if we are prepared for the coming reversal. It does not care if our satellites fail or if our birds lose their way. It merely continues its inexorable turn, governed by the cold laws of thermodynamics and the churning of molten metal in the abyss. We are living in the shadow of a cosmic shift, standing on the threshold of a new epoch where the old rules of the compass will no longer apply. The battery is draining, the shield is weakening, and the machine moves ever closer to its next great transformation, leaving us to contemplate our place in a universe that is as beautiful as it is indifferent to our survival. Beyond the current oscillations and the temporary reversals of the magnetic poles lies a far more profound and terminal transformation. While we fret over the disruption of our satellites and the shifting of our navigation charts, a deeper, more inexorable process is unfolding beneath our feet. The Earth is a thermodynamic engine, a machine of heat and motion that has been running for 4,500,000,000 years. But every engine, no matter how vast or primordial, is subject to the cold laws of entropy. The furnace at the heart of our world is cooling. The inner core, a solid sphere of iron and nickel as hot as the surface of the sun, is growing. It expands by a few millimeters every year as the liquid metal of the outer core loses its heat to the mantle and freezes onto the central mass. This is the ticking clock of our planet. For eons, the churning of that liquid iron has served as the geodynamo, the restless mechanism that generates our magnetic shield. It is a symphony of convection, driven by the escape of heat from the deep interior toward the cold vacuum of space. But this heat is a finite resource, a remnant of the violent collisions that formed the world and the radioactive decay of heavy elements trapped within the abyss. In the far future, hundreds of millions of years from now, the liquid outer core will finally reach its critical threshold. The great currents of molten metal will slow. The eddies and swirls that sustain the magnetic field will begin to falter, not for a brief reversal, but for eternity. The geodynamo will stall, the machine will stop. When the last of the liquid iron crystallizes into a solid tomb, the Earth will become a silent sentinel in the dark. Without the shield of the magnetic field, the atmosphere will find itself defenseless against the relentless pressure of the solar wind. This stream of high-energy particles issued from the sun will begin to erode the very air we breathe. One molecule at a time, the oxygen, nitrogen and water vapour of our world will be stripped away and cast into the void. This is the fate of all rocky worlds that lose their internal fire. We see the precursor of this catastrophe in the red dust of Mars, a world that once possessed oceans and a thick atmosphere, only to have them devoured by the solar wind after its own core grew cold and its magnetic shield vanished. The Earth will follow this same path toward oblivion. The oceans will evaporate, their constituent atoms unravelling under the assault of ultraviolet radiation and stellar winds. The vibrant green and blue tapestry of our biosphere will be bleached into a monochromatic desert. The silence will be absolute. There will be no birds to lose their way, no aurora to dance in the sky, and no consciousness to record the final descent into the abyss. The planet will remain, a barren rock orbiting a middle-aged star, but the mechanism of life will have been dismantled by the simple, ruthless progression of cooling metal. We find ourselves in a unique and haunting position within this cosmic timeline. We are the first consciousness to emerge from the machine with the capacity to map the architecture of our own destruction. We have peered into the deep interior of the world and calculated the rate of its decay. We have looked at the distant stars and understood the physics of the void. This knowledge does not grant us power over the process, for we cannot reignite the core or halt the loss of heat, but it transforms our role from mere inhabitants to the witnesses of the cosmos. There is a profound, melancholic optimism in this realization. Our existence is a brief flicker of light in a universe that is largely cold, dark and indifferent. We are the way the universe looks at itself, the way the machine contemplates its own design. The fact that we can foresee the cooling of our core and the eventual stripping of our atmosphere makes our current epoch all the more precious. The magnetic field is not a permanent right, but a temporary gift, a byproduct of a specific stage in the life of a cooling planet. We are living in the golden hour of the Earth. We exist during the precise window of time when the core is liquid enough to generate a shield, but solid enough to provide a stable platform for life. This alignment of physical parameters is a rare and fleeting event in the history of the universe. To understand that it must end is to understand the true value of the present. The light of our civilization is valuable only because the shadow of the coming collapse is visible to us. We are the observers who give meaning to the transition, the ones who narrate the slow, majestic winding down of the planetary clock. As the magnetic field continues its current decline, we are reminded that we are passengers on a magnificent, failing machine. The ruthless machine of the universe does not seek to destroy us, nor does it seek to preserve us. It merely functions according to its inherent nature. The iron freezes, the heat dissipates, and the shield weakens. This is not a tragedy, but a fundamental truth of the cosmos. Everything that is ignited must eventually fade. Every tapestry must eventually unravel. In the end, the Earth will join the ranks of the dead worlds, its internal fire extinguished, its surface scoured by the sun, and its memory lost to the eternal void. But for this brief moment, we are here. We are the consciousness that feels the warmth of the sun and understands the cold of the abyss. We are the ones who see the mechanism for what it is. In the face of inevitable oblivion, our ability to witness and understand the process is our greatest triumph. We stand on the threshold of the future, watching the sunset of our world, and in that watching, we transcend the very machine that created us. The universe is a cold and silent place, but through us, it has found a voice to lament its own decay and to marvel at its own fleeting, magnificent complexity.